Good morning, everyone. This is so exciting to see so many of you joining us early in the morning here today. I'm Romy Newman, the co-founder of Fairygodboss, and I'm so excited to be here with you. I'm going to turn it over to Julia, who's going to welcome everybody.
Thank you, Romy, and good morning. My name is Julia Lang, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's session hosted in partnership with Fairygodboss. For those of you who are less familiar with Fairygodboss, they are a virtual community where women and advocates for women in the workplace can share insights on companies and interact with one another to seek advice on a wide range of topics. It's really an organization that's open to all women of all backgrounds and all ages. Boston Scientific has invested in this community because of the importance we place in empowering women and the valuable contributions they make both in the workplace and the world every day. We are currently ranked #3 in best places to work for women's rankings, and our CEO is also ranked among the top leaders on the site. We feel it's so important to showcase our brand and our own Fairygodboss stories so that others can connect and make this their employer of choice as well. I know in Neuromod we have really enjoyed our relationship with Romy, and Fairygodboss, and we've had a lot of high quality candidates come through our relationship with them, as well as the opportunity to network with them on a regular basis. So to talk a little bit about our speaker, Romy, she's on a mission to improve the workplace for women by creating greater transparency. She's co-founder and president, as she mentioned, of Fairygodboss, the largest career community for female professionals. And prior to founding Fairygodboss, Romy spent over 10 years at the Wall Street Journal, Google, and Estee Lauder, where she had various leadership roles and is a proud mother of 2, wife to a very supportive husband, a devoted yogi, and lover of crossword puzzles. So with that, please welcome Romy on our, what I know will be a very engaging session this morning. Romy?
Julia, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. As Julia mentioned, I came to Fairygodboss after many years in corporate America. And so what I'll be sharing with you today are some observations and kind of takeaways that I've learned, I think, through my adventures, both in a corporate role and then kind of seeing that corporate role and seeing that experience from the removed lens of being an entrepreneur and thinking about, wow, that didn't have to be that way, or I could have done something differently. But one of the things that I think about a lot is, there's a pretty dire statistic that says, bear with me, I'm going to pull up our presentation here, but there's a pretty dire statistic that says, from the World Economic Forum, it says that we are 202 years away from achieving gender parity in the workplace. Yes, I said 202 years, which is really bleak. But rather than be dismayed by that statistic, what I think about is, okay, what are the things that we could do that would radically advance gender diversity and gender equality in the workplace, so that maybe if we don't make it to true gender parity in my lifetime, maybe we'll get there in my daughter's lifetime, and she's 5. So there's so many things that need to change in order to facilitate a world that supports gender equality. But as we know, we can only change the things that we can control. So what I like to think about are, what are the things we could do in our behavior every day that would advance gender diversity, advance gender equality, and benefit us at the same time? So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Here's our 4 things you all could be thinking about doing differently in your life every day. Some are big things, some are small things, but there are things that you can do to help kind of nudge the universe toward more gender equality. And this is actually the statistic. It's going to take 217 years. The good news is it's now down to 202 years, but that's still not fast enough. We can't wait 200 years for gender equality. I should also mention, by the way, before I dive into this whole presentation, that I welcome you to ask questions using the tool that we have here. So I don't know if any of you saw this. It was a viral kind of meme that was going around for a while, but it was an art student who was in an art class, and the teacher said, "Dial down the feminism." So she created this art that said, "Dial down the feminism." And on one end of the spectrum is a raging feminist, and on the other side is complicit in my own dehumanization. And so this was the art she gave back to her teacher when he told her to dial down the feminism. And, you know, I think for a long time when I was growing up, it was like a bad thing to be a feminist. I always would say, you know, oh, I support women, but I'm not a feminist. But I think today we all have to think about truly, if we're going to advance that timeline, it's time to really plug into that feminism, because when we're not, we're not helping ourselves. We're not fulfilling our own promise. And when we dial to the right, the benefits accrue to us directly. So I'm going to take a minute back and just tell you about Fairygodboss. And thank you to Julia for that lovely introduction. I hope you all will take a minute to visit our website. We are the largest career community for women. We've got about 3 million women using the site every day, or every month, I should say, to come share information, get advice, give advice, read our articles, and look for jobs and make connections with our other users. And so we hope you'll all join and be part of our community. The way that Fairygodboss came to be, as Julia mentioned, I used to work at the Wall Street Journal, and my co-founder, Georgine, was also working there, and she, out of nowhere, she was fired. And she had been a top performer, and she was suddenly fired, and she was 2 months pregnant. Nobody knew it. Nobody did anything wrong. She wasn't showing, she wasn't telling, but it meant that she had to go find a job as a pregnant job seeker. And so it put into really sharp focus for her that there was a very specific set of questions that she wanted answers to before she would even consider applying for a job. She wanted to know, are women treated well? As they are clearly at Boston Scientific, considering that you are number 3 in our list of top companies for women. She wanted to know what other women had to say about their experiences. She wanted to know what the work-life balance expectations were. Would she be able to leave work at 6 o'clock to go see her children and have dinner with them? She wanted to know what benefits were like. So she did what all good job seekers do. She went online and started researching the answers to her questions, but she couldn't find them anywhere. So instead of finding a new job, being a true entrepreneur, she said, I'm going to just build this thing and see if I can get people to come to it. And that's how Fairygodboss came to be. And she approached me, and I had this serious corporate job, and I thought, I'm ready for an adventure. And so I jumped, and that was 4 years ago, and I've not regretted it since. We've had a lot of success. We've even raised venture capital in a market in which only 2% of venture capital investment goes to female-founded companies. So we're really excited about the success we've had so far. We're really grateful to our partners like Boston Scientific, who've helped us get success. We're excited about what's more to come. So we invite you all to come be part of our community. And when you are part of our community, you can use your real name or you can be anonymous. And we noticed that women really prefer having that option because it can be sometimes uncomfortable to reveal your identity. So as I mentioned, one of the key things you'll find on our site is that we have these anonymous reviews for women by women. Of all the reviews left, 60% of women say that they feel they're treated fairly, and 63% of women say they'd recommend their companies to other women. So this is a little bit of a glass half full, glass half empty situation. On the glass half full piece, it's more than half. But wow, we'd like this to be a lot closer to 100. And I think this sort of informs that 200-year number I was mentioning up front. We have a long way to go before most women in the workplace experience what they perceive as real parity. I'm going to jump ahead here. So what we're here to talk about today, what can you all do to advance gender equality every day and advance your own career? So number 1, learn how to brag. Number 2, specialize. Number 3, create boundaries. And number 4, help other women. So I'll take you through each of those. So first of all, there was this seminal research that came out of McKinsey in 2011. And it was actually co-authored with the Lean In organization, with Sheryl Sandberg's organization. And one of the key things that the team found was that women lag men in promotion, and we see that too. We see many women in our community who find that they're not promoted equally. But the reason for that is that women are promoted based on performance, and men are promoted based on potential. In other words, in order to get to the next role, women have to have actually tangibly done the job that needs to be done past promotion, demonstrated that they're able to do every piece of it. Whereas managers are more likely to take a leap of faith on a man and see kind of this amorphous potential in him and say, you know, I think Greg looks like a vice president. I think he should be promoted. And it's interesting because when I first read the statistic, oh man, it hit me hard, because I felt like I had experienced this many times, and it had been enraging, really. So I wish that this wasn't true. However, I think it is, and it still continues to be. And one day, maybe when my daughter is a manager, this won't be true anymore. But in the meantime, we can't change perceptions. We can't change patterns like this. What we can do is understand them and learn how to operate within them. And so if you are a woman who's looking for advancement, looking to get promoted, there's a few things you should think about too. First of all, I recommend you all find ways to seek stretch assignments. I know it's extra work, but it will so pay off because it gives you a real opportunity to demonstrate that you are able to do the next thing and showcase your skills. And what I recommend is that you find high-profile stretch assignments. So I point to this one, which was a stretch assignment that really put my career on the map. I had been sort of like in the data analysis room of being part of the project to relaunch WSJ Weekend, and clearly I'm dating myself because this was in 2010. You can see it on the slide. But I was really one of the data people behind this launch, and I said, no way, I want to take over and run this product launch from end to end. And when I said that I wanted to do that, everyone looked at me like I was crazy. They said, oh, you don't have enough experience to do this. And usually I can be dissuaded pretty easily, but for once, for some reason, I wasn't ready to take no for an answer. I knew that this was the project I wanted to work on, and I knew I could do a good job at it. So I came back and I wrote a 30, 60, 90-day plan about how I would lead the WSJ Weekend launch to huge success. And I brought it to my managers and I walked them through it, and they said, wow, this is great work, but you don't have enough experience to run this project. You're not going to get this job. And so for some reason, at that point, I was like, I got nothing to lose. So I just started to do the job. I put together who were the contacts I was going to reach out to. Nobody had been named for the job yet, so I just started doing it. And I walked in, I said, look, I've already done this. I've done. Will you give me this job? And they finally just said, they were like, mercy, fine, you can have this job. I can see nobody else would want it as much as you would. And what was crazy about it was I took on this job. It was a full second job to the addition to the one at my day job. I got no extra money for it, but I did get a ton of recognition. And it forever changed the trajectory of my career because in a year, I had shown a tremendous amount of success on the product launch. And after that, I became acknowledged as someone who could really successfully run a project, who could successfully deliver revenue. And it took, whereas probably a man could have been tapped to take this on and show he could do it, and then his career would fly. I had to fight from the bottom up to get this opportunity, but because I invested the fight, it made all the difference for me down the road. And so I encourage you to think about what kind of stretch assignments. They don't have to be this extreme. They don't have to be a whole second job, but look at ways you can get involved in new things and show people what you can do. Also, once I successfully launched the weekend newspaper, all I did was walk around and talk about it to the point that I was annoying myself. And I'll tell you why. So as the brilliant Carla Harris says, you will not be in the room when somebody is discussing your promotion. So all they've got is what they know about you. And my background is marketing. And in one of the adages of traditional marketing is that somebody needs to absorb a message or hear a message 3 times before they really internalize it. And so I wanted to be seen as Romy, the person who could drive revenue. So it wasn't enough for me to do it. It wasn't enough for me to say it. I had to say it over and over again to anybody who might be in the room when they were talking about who was getting promoted, because I wasn't going to be. So that when I wasn't in the room, somebody would say, oh, you know, I heard Romy's, I can't remember where I heard this from. Of course, they heard it from me. But Romy is great at driving revenue. So that is something else to think about. What are you great at? What is your elevator pitch? And whenever you encounter management, take a moment to say, oh, hey, I have some really good news. The project I was working on delivered ahead of time at XYZ. So you have to, the other way I say it is you have to be your own publicist, and you have to be constantly talking up your contributions. We know that women are significantly less likely than men to have ever asked for a raise or promotion. This is data from Fairygodboss. And we know that women are much more likely than men to have determined that someone else, actually found out that someone else was being paid the same to do, being paid more to do the same work. So that's the world. We want it to change. And the first way it can change is for you to get vocal and advocate for yourself in a way that's going to really resonate in this atmosphere. And I have a few different book recommendations throughout this presentation, some weekend reading for you, but one of them was a great book by a woman, brilliant woman named Michelle Gadsden-Williams, who leads diversity and inclusion at Accenture. And one of the things she said is, hard work alone will not pay off. And I think for someone like me who was taught from an early stage, if I just work really hard, the opportunities will come my way. I think what I learned in my career is, unfortunately, that is not the case. We have to make our own destiny. So to summarize, think about bragging. Figure out what your elevator pitch is. And, you know, we're taught as young girls not to brag, but get out there, talk about the good things you've done, do good things, find ways to do really remarkable good things that can be noticed and remembered, and then repeat yourself and talk about that and figure out what you deserve and ask for it. On similar lines, Mika Brzezinski, the broadcaster, talks a lot about knowing your value. And I think this is something that the men I know are so good at. They spend a crazy amount of time online researching what they get paid, what they could get paid. But do you know what you're worth? Do you know what you can and should be getting paid? Are you getting paid what you think you really should be? And then, what are you doing to augment your value? Now, recently I got to talk to this amazing woman named Andrea Gallego. Andrea is the Chief Technology Officer of Boston Consulting Group. And what's crazy about Andrea is that she was an investment banker. She had no background in technology. She worked at Lehman Brothers when it collapsed. And when she was thinking about what she would do next, she realized that the real next set of skills, the way the world is going, even if you're in finance, is to technology. So she decided to take herself back to school, even though she had a well-established career in finance. And she got a master's in computer science. And I think that was so courageous. But I also think what a good investment in herself. And we invest in ourselves in so many ways all the time, personally and professionally. But I don't think we're often so deliberate about, okay, what kind of career do I want? What are the skills that are needed for that career? And how do I take radical, dramatic steps to augment my skill set so that I will be relevant and successful in the future? And I think another interesting piece about that is, or another way of looking at it is, usually if I'm in a room full of people and I give this, I say, how many of you own a house? But if you own a house, go with me. And if you don't own a house, you can imagine owning a house. If you own a house, you do things like renovate a bathroom, or you re-tile the roof, or you landscape. You do all these things with the idea in mind being that your house has a value. It's your investment, and your investment. I think we should all be thinking about our careers the same way. How are we improving the value of our career and ourselves when we're getting paid? Of course, one really important way to do that is through mentorship. And what's unfortunate is that our research says over and over again that women have a much harder time building relationships for mentoring or sponsoring. And that's partly because, I think that's partly because there are fewer women in senior roles. I think it's partly because it can be awkward to ask a man in a senior role. I think it's also because women are already working very hard at work and very hard at home, and so they rarely lift their head up. I think about the bottom quote here. Carol Bartz, he used to be the CEO of Yahoo, said women spend much more time doing and much less time networking. And a very smart lady named Carolyn Everson, who's the VP of Global Marketing Solutions at Facebook, says every person should have a personal board of directors, which I think is so smart. But so, and to me, a board of directors is somebody that you actually tap. I think there's all kinds of movement and redefinition of this idea of mentors and sponsors, but I strongly recommend that if you want to advance your career or increase your value, you should figure out who's your board of directors, and you should connect with them, set goals for yourself each quarter, and report back to them on these. And that's a really good way to engage your mentors and sponsors and help give an agenda to your conversations with them. And you may be saying, oh my God, I don't have any time for this. I am so busy. But you know what? You may not be prioritizing the right things. Because as Carol says, you're spending more time doing and less time networking. And the reality is the men I've known and the men who advance are spending a lot less time working and a lot more time networking. And maybe there's a happy medium. But I think we have trouble seeing the forest through the trees. And there's it's hard to prioritize ourselves, but the only way we're going to increase our value is to prioritize ourselves. So think about where do you want to go in 5 years? Lay out a plan, bring it to your board of directors, identify the gaps in your skills, and figure out how are you going to build and advance yourself toward those skills. And in the meantime, create boundaries. So I think it can be, for all of us, it can be so hard to stop working because we all want to be something called the ideal worker. So this amazing woman named Lisa Stromberg wrote a book called Work, Pause, Thrive that is fascinating. It is a study about a group of women basically in the Silicon Valley area who all took time off from work and kind of rebooted, or if they didn't take time off, they downshifted for a time after they had children and went back. But the thing is, in our culture, the reality is we're expected to be this ideal worker. We're expected to be available every hour of the day. We're expected to deliver more than anyone could have expected. And we're so focused on advancing women that we don't really give respect to the notion that many of us are caregivers, men and women, right? And we don't, in this society, in this culture, don't place enough value on caregiving. And so this is a systemic issue that needs to change, but we should all assert our caregiving roles. One way to do this is sort of like bring your whole self to work. I'm really sorry, I'm gonna miss work on Thursday because it's parent-teacher conference day. I'll be working from home. And asserting it and being willing, when you are willing to speak up about that, you are setting a new standard for men and women to say, look, it's okay. I can go to parent-teacher conferences and still do a great job at work. And don't say, I think I said it wrong. I said, I'm sorry, I'm going to miss work on Thursday. Don't say, I'm sorry, I'm not coming to work on Thursday. So I think, as women, myself included, we have a tendency to apologize. We need to stop apologizing and really set boundaries. Technology has really forced our work into our homes at all times, and it's okay to push back on that, or it's okay to then bring your home to work, because there are only so many hours in the day, and we have a responsibility to caregiving as parents, and also in our society we have a responsibility to care for the next generation. We know that unfortunately in the world women still do significantly more tasks like childcare, cleaning. We also know all this research shows that working mothers today spend more time with children than stay-at-home moms did 20 years ago, 30 years ago. One of my favorite books is by this woman, Tiffany Dufu. If you have not read it, I so highly recommend it. But it's called Drop the Ball. And it's this idea that all of us women are running around trying to do all these things perfectly. And at the end of the day, we're going to drive ourselves crazy and we're not doing any of them well. So we should just figure out that there's a few things we're not going to do very well. Like maybe, you know, I'm not going to be able to give my son a great packed lunch every day, so I'm just going to buy the school lunch. Or, you know what, maybe we're not going to make it to every birthday party, or whatever it is. We're both at home and at work. We have to decide what we're going to just let go and focus on the most important things. This is another book I highly recommend. I loved this book. It's called Essentialism, which is the disciplined pursuit of less. And this author says you cannot overestimate the unimportance of practically everything. But the thesis of his book is that and I'm sure you've seen similar things, we're spending so much time on stuff that's urgent but not that important. And so given that the time constraints of our life are more radical than ever, more extreme than ever, how do we pick the things that really matter at work and in our personal life and focus on them, and then let the rest of it go guilt-free? It's funny, this is a presentation I give pretty regularly, and when I built it, not that many people knew who Brene Brown was, but I think over the last couple of months she's become extremely famous. She's a new Netflix special. She's incredible. And her career started, actually, she was a shame researcher. And one of the things that she writes about is how shame disproportionately impacts and cripples women. And I know I have felt that myself. But the idea is that, you know what, if I'm going to have to miss a work commitment, or if I have to not deliver on something, I might feel really ashamed. And I shouldn't. I should feel empowered. I've made a conscious decision not to deliver on this. Don't let shame be your guide. Take ownership, take pride, because we can become such victims of our own shame that it can be really crippling. So set boundaries. Decide you're going to go home at 5 and go home at 5. Set goals on how you'll be out of the office. Set an example for other employees by saying, no, I'm going to leave at 5. No, I'm not going to work this weekend. I have flexible working. I'm going to use it. And the more that you do that, the more normalized it will become, the more you're creating permission for others. And lastly, I think if there's one way in which I personally could leave change in the world, it would be on this topic of how women treat each other poorly. I'm so sad to see that it continues to be a concern. This is an article recently from Harvard Business Review. Research suggests that women are bullying each other at work. Women experience more incivility at work, especially from other women. This is heartbreaking to me. So ultimately, whether intentionally or unintentionally, or because we're conditioned that way, today women are still not treating each other as well as we can. And I think we all have to think about and be conscientious of how we can change that. I think this is, you know, what we're all trained to be when we're young. These are for two different generations. There's mean girls and there's Heathers. But I think, you know, I have, as I mentioned, I have this 5-year-old daughter, and I see her friends being mean to each other already. And little girls, for some reason, and then we grow up, are trained to be competitive and difficult and judgmental. So I would urge us all to just pause and think, treat ourselves and each other with generosity, and stop judging. You know, for example, sometimes, you know, you might look at someone, I would look at someone and say, oh, I don't like that sweater. But why am I thinking that way? Let her sweater go. We just have to all, and instead kind of like transmit feelings and sentiments of love and support. And I think that alone and that sense of unity would make the difference. And that's really one of the things that from the bottom of my heart we're trying to create with Fairygodboss, is a place that women can come together and collaborate and be a team instead of knocking each other down. And so then the end result would be something like this. I don't know if any of you have heard this Olympian, she's a marathoner, Shailene Flanagan. But she was crossing the finish line at a marathon, and she was training with her team, running with her team. And instead of crossing and getting her best time, she went back and waited for her team and brought them across with her. And she says, elevating other women is actually an act of self-interest. It's not so lonely at the top if you're bringing others along. And another story from my days at the Wall Street Journal that I love to share is that by pure coincidence, I just ended up becoming best friends, very good work friends with my head of HR. And I was in a business role, she was in an HR role. And she was a rising star and I was a rising star. And so what happened was we were never in the same room when key topics were being discussed. But when I was not there, she would advocate for me. So kind of going back to that Carla Harris, who's in the room talking about when you get promoted, she was there. And when she was not in the room, I would advocate for her. And then we would tell each other what happened in the rooms, whether it was about each other's careers or about projects, and we would back channel information. And as a result, we made each other's much stronger. We made our careers really flourish much more because we were doing this sort of mutual support of each other. And I wish I could say that that was deliberate. I wish I could say I was so smart that we came up with this, but it was totally inadvertent. But what I think I learned a lot from it, and I'd love to find a way to have that be something we're always thinking about. Who are you building alliances with? Who are you colluding with and working together with to help get each other promoted, like Shailene Flanagan, so we can all cross the finish line together. And I love these pictures, but I look at like how I think we're moving to a moment in the world where women are building alliances with each other. You look at like Gail and Oprah, or you look at Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, and these women have not built their career in a vacuum. They've brought other women along with them. So as you think about going about your day, how are you helping other women? And that, depending on how much time you have or how much power, that can be anything from helping get other women promoted or helping mentor other women to just being nice to other women, or if they do well in a meeting, come by and say, oh, you did a great job in that meeting. And you know what? If they didn't do well in a meeting, say, you did a good job. Here's some other things I think you might want to think about that would make you more effective in the next meeting. That is my overview of things we can all do to help advance gender diversity and our own careers at the same time. We'd love to invite you all to join our Fairygodboss community. You can review your employer, you can sign up to receive our newsletter, you can follow us, and we'd love to have you join us. And I'd also love to hear if any of you have any questions. I'm going to have to, I think, stop sharing in order to see if you have questions. Questions, thoughts, comments, criticisms, throw them my way. I can take it. I always joke that having become an entrepreneur has made me have to have such a thick skin. But you just, I recently listened to a work-life podcast that was all about from TED. I don't know if you guys have listened to those, from Adam Grant, but about how if you can channel rejection, it will make you that much more successful. So I'm ready for criticism and rejection. When you're talking about building a board of directors, you mean inside and out, or inside your company or outside of your company? So I think I would strongly advise both, but especially outside your company. I actually had an unfortunate, or not tragic, but a thing happened at the Wall Street Journal where I had an amazing sponsor and he supported me for so long and he was really fantastic. I think he got me promoted like 5 times, literally. And then he resigned, he retired. And so I think if you put too many eggs into one basket, there's so much uncertainty. So I think it's useful to have directors inside your company who understand the lay of the land and understand where there's opportunity for you internally. And I think you should always kind of have a foot in something that's outside, somebody who can help you externally. Any other questions? These are such nice comments. I'm getting lovely comments that thank you for re-energizing me. The bragging thing is so hard. How do you do it in a way that's not annoying? Yes. So I think I always say that bragging is like a muscle. You have to practice it, and you may not have finesse when you start. So I recommend, I actually recommend whenever we have events for Fairygodboss, we make everyone go around the table and brag. And if the next time you're having a dinner party, you're out with your girlfriends, make them all brag. And it can be about something personal or professional. But I think, there's a way eventually to do it in a way that's natural and it's not so bragging. So, I heard there was a speaking opportunity coming up. I'm really good at public speaking, so would you be interested in having me do it? And so it's really uncomfortable. It's still so uncomfortable for me. But I think the more you do it, the more you can do it with a little bit of finesse or just sort of like de-emphasis so it doesn't seem like you're so obviously bragging. Do I have a recommendation as to how many people should be on your board of directors? So I think probably between 4 and 6. I think more than that is hard to keep up with. But I also think it will really pay dividends if you pay attention to keeping up with a set of influential people, find the most influential people you know and keep up with them every 6 months. And you don't have to meet with them every 3 to 6 months, but you could just shoot them an email and say, hey, this is what I told you I was working on. Here's what I'm working on. Here's what I've done. And stay in touch with them. I'm getting lots of comments that are just lovely and supportive. Oh, I'm missing the Q&A. Here's the Q&A, sorry. What would I recommend if I feel nervous about approaching your boss with more assertive boundaries? I mean, so obviously every situation is different, but I think this is where the bragging can help. If you say, oh, hey boss, you know how you asked me to finish the report by Thursday? It's already done, so I'm gonna be home with my son tomorrow. I'll be on email if you need me. So I think reiterating your value. I also am a big believer in helping deliver value to your boss. Like, hey, I already finished this report you needed me to finish. What else can I do to help you? It seems like you've got a lot on your plate. That's the salesperson in me. By the way, I'm gonna be working from home tomorrow, but I can help with anything you need tomorrow or Friday. How would one elevate herself when there aren't many growth opportunities within your field? Well, that's where I think you can identify the skill. Maybe the growth is not your field. Maybe you need to figure out kind of what your lateral or next step is, or complete reboot and figure out where and how you can adapt your career to an area where there's more opportunity. Well done. Let's see. Oops. This question goes to the boundaries, the work pride thought. Yeah, everybody should read Work, Pause, Thrive. It's an amazing book, but it's also like it's brutal to see what American standards are like compared to some of the other countries and the expectations on caregivers. If your company offers flexible options like part-time work or flex work 9 days of 10, but you don't know anybody takes advantage of these, any tips for broaching this topic without impacting your career? 2 thoughts. Number 1, it's so much always easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. So just strike out and do it and lead the pack. But this is another place where the alliance could be huge. Find another woman or 2 or 3 or men and say, you know, they say we've got flexibility, but I can't figure out how to take it. Want to try to do this together? And the 2 of you or the 3 of you do it so you don't have to feel all alone, and you can talk about what you learned. And by the way, the other thing is, I think there's this concern about, oh, how can you advocate for flexibility without looking like you're not motivated for growth or development? And I think it's just conversation. So the more candid you can be with your manager, the better. To say, look, as you know, I'm a working mother. My kids are young. They're at home. I have a lot of obligations to them, but I want you to know that that does not dampen my ambition at all. And I believe I can do a great job on this job and still give my family the time that I need. In order to do that, let's just be really clear on your expectations from me. I commit to over-delivering on your expectations from me. And in exchange, what I'll be doing is just having more flexibility in my hours. So I'll be sure to deliver on all the things, or over deliver on all the things you expect me to, but I'm also going to be seeking more flexibility. Let's try this for a month, and at the end of the month, let's debrief and see how it's working for you. So I also think there's so much of like treating your career and conversations about your career and your performance in the way that you would talk about a project at work. Let's see. Do I believe individuals own our work-life balance enough, or realize too strongly on the employer to wave a magic wand and deliver balance? Well, funny question. I think we women are the worst taskmasters of ourselves. I think that the expectations that we think our company has of us are much greater than the ones they actually have. So I think the number 1 reason that myself included, we don't have more work-life balance is because of the expectations we're putting on we think are on us for work that aren't even. So I think and again, this goes back to sort of like the shame and the conditioning, but I think I would challenge yourself and have, again, go back to this open dialogue for your manager to say, look, I want to continue over-delivering on your expectations for me, and over-delivering on my deliverables. And I also want to explore how I can have more flexibility. Here's what I'm thinking. Does that work for you? Let's test it out. And we'll talk again in about a month and see how it's working for both of us. Do I have any advice for remote employees, especially in terms of FaceTime? Yeah, I mean, I do think, there are great tools like email or Slack, but I think a weekly report about what you're accomplishing that you send out to a pretty wide audience is useful. I also think maybe kind of seeing if you can take on a stretch assignment or there's extra work you can do that would help you touch or get reintroduced to other people is always useful. Do I have good examples of structured mentor programs? I don't, and here's why. I think the world's moving away from structured mentor programs, and I think instead things should be more customized. And what you could do is think about like setting, if you're all familiar with OKRs, I don't know if you are, but I'm a huge fan of OKRs. There's a book about that too. They're objectives and key results. What I'd recommend is that you set quarterly OKRs for yourself and bring those to your board of directors or to your mentors and say, here's what I'm trying to achieve. Do you think these are the right things to be trying to achieve? And if so, what do you think I'm missing that I don't have to go about them? And as you know, what I'd love to do is check back in with you in a couple months and see if I've achieved. And if I mean, I think really what's going to happen is a good mentor will say, great, how can I help you? And if they don't, find another mentor. Could I elaborate on the elevator pitch? What should it sound like? So in my case, it was, I'd find myself sitting with an executive I didn't know and say, hi, I'm Romy. What do you do here? Well, I actually just relaunched the weekend newspaper. We achieved 30 million in new revenue, and it was a tremendous success. We have 10 new customers. So I think also data-driven elevator pitches, but also this goes to the bragging too, that's really hard, but hi, I'm Romy. I'm really great at monetization. And I think it's funny, things in the world like a LinkedIn profile encourage us to figure out what's your thing, what's your game. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and I love when people in their, that job description at the top, instead of saying, I'm president for Fairygodboss, it should say like, I'm an ambassador for women's rights or something where you take it up a level and kind of create an identity for yourself around your elevator pitch. How do we know when it's a good time to ask for a raise or bring up the possibility of a promotion? I actually have an article about this that I strongly recommend you read. If you Google it, you should be able to find it. But in short, a couple things. I think it's so important when we ask for a raise or promotion to understand the formal budgeting and assessment cycle of our company, because a lot of times when you ask your boss, they may not be in a position to do it. So I think when you're asking for a promotion or a raise, you want to make it as easy for your boss to advocate for you as possible, because ultimately chances are it's A, it's not up to them, and B, you're giving them work. It's a lot of work having been a manager to then advocate for someone on your team for a raise. So help them. Document for them what you've achieved, what you can continue to achieve. Document to them why you think you deserve, and in writing, why you think you deserve a promotion, because they're now going to you have to sell them in on it. And now they're going to have to take that up to their management. So help make it easy for them. And also find a good time of day. This is a crazy thing, but like 5 o'clock on Friday, not a great time. Like 11:58 a.m. when they haven't had lunch yet, not a good time. My department is all female, and I'm trying to set boundaries. I need someone in the office. How do I manage expectations? How about like a Google sheet or like a doodle? And like, we love flexibility in this department. Let's empower ourselves to continue to benefit from flexibility and achieve as a department by deciding who's in the office when and making sure there's coverage. It's totally reasonable to say we need coverage and dividing up the coverage. And I think actually it will seem more equitable and also help create a real sense of collaboration and team. When I took on that stretch project, which required me to work essentially a second hour after jobs, how did I turn that off? You meaning so I think the question is like, once if I did a second job, how come everybody didn't just expect me to do a second job forever? Well, I mean, I will say on the bright side, I chose a project that had a pretty clear finite date. Like there was a launch date and then it would be over. But I think that is probably the way to go. If you're going to take on a stretch, don't take on a second volunteer job. Just find a project that you can align yourself with, or an effort. Or when you're champion to take it on, say, you know, I think I'm the best person for the job and I could take this on, but there's a couple things I need to come off my plate in order to do it. Do you think there's somebody else who might be able to take these on? Another question. As an 100% remote employee, I've struggled to convince teams to take a leap and go for a remote employee on a project, despite my documented success. That is difficult, and I think you're going to have to, again, think about doing more content marketing, how do you communicate your value regularly via email, via Skype, whatever it is. But I think you're going to have to package yourselves up and think as a content marketer would about communicating what you're bringing to the table. I'm in the process of moving to a more senior role. I'm a typical woman who is not at all confident in the conversations around salary and negotiating the package. How do I suggest approaching the topic without appearing too aggressive? I always think it's much easier to be data-driven. There's so many resources out there like Pay Scale where you can look and see what others make, you can ask around. But I think if you can come to the table and say, look, this is what others are making in this role. So it seems to me that it would be the right move to give me a raise. But I think if you can make it not personal and be data-driven, and again, also, whoever you're talking to is probably not the final decision maker. So help arm them with the information they're going to need to make a case to their boss about how to give you a raise. Do I have any advice for building relationships with your male peers? I think it's, you know, I came to sales, I built a career in sales, but I didn't start in sales until this weekend project. So I was 35 years old when I moved into sales. But I think it's all about creating a rapport, finding commonality, disarming, and just also being candid about like, hey, I think what you're doing is interesting, like working with you, how do we work together? Do I think bragging is a cultural thing? Maybe. I think bragging is a cultural thing, but I also think that a lot of so the question is, in the EU, I've heard many times that I'm not great at X. Is when people say they're not great at something, it's appreciated. Maybe we should find a more subtle way. So, you know, maybe, but I think there is tremendous bias in the American workplace that we're fighting against every day. And so far, subtlety has not been rewarded. And so look, I'm not a bragger at heart, but I also think that it's, you know, many things like a muscle you need to flex. And I talk about actually how having become an entrepreneur, you know, I'm trying to make my business successful. So it has required me to do things like this, you know, require me to embrace self-promotion in a completely ruthless and uncomfortable way. And once you do it, not only does it get more comfortable, but it also, you know, I hope it provides benefits to others. What if you already got asked for a raise, but you want more since you're still being paid below market rate? Again, so I'm a big believer in treating these conversations like you would talk about a business project. So you go to your boss and say, you know what, so grateful for this raise. I noticed through my research and these data points, which I will present to you, that I'm still being paid below fair market value. How can we build a plan for me to move toward a raise in a year or 6 months? What time frame do you think is appropriate, manager? And what will you need to see from me in order to make this happen? And get their buy-in, help them be part of the solution. Last question is, will you have access to these slides? 100%, and then you can take a look at all the books. And you're welcome to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect with all of you. Really grateful to you for spending time with us here today. If you like what you heard, if you like Fairygodboss, please tell your friends. We are excited about our growth, but our growth depends on getting recommended and referred and shared. So it was wonderful to spend time with you all. Thank you very much for having me. Bye.